So I was first diagnosed with autism when I was 23 years old. And during this time, I felt really lonely. I felt confused. I felt a lot of shame. And in this video today, I want to share some tips that I wish I had when I was first diagnosed with autism, because I know how lonely it feels, because I know just like how confusing it can feel. And it really does feel like everything that you thought you knew about yourself, that you thought you knew about your life, everything that you wanted your future to be, it feels like it just changes and you have this like newfound understanding, and it can be really overwhelming. And I know for me it was a long process of trying to figure out what it meant for me, how it explained so many things in my past, how it explains so many things in my present, and how it can affect me and help me and give me the guidance I need for my future. So I made a list of some things that I wish I had when I was first diagnosed with autism. And the first thing that I would say is, don't rush this process. I know that we want things to be figured out, and we want to have everything figured out, and we want to know what things mean. Especially us autistic folks, we like to understand things. At least I know I do. And this was really hard because this was something that I didn't like really fully understand. And that's just because my entire worldview shifted with this diagnosis. I realized why I was the way that I was. I realized so many things about my past. I had a lot of different just like traumas that came up that I was starting to process and relating to my autism. And I was like, oh, okay, so that explains that, and that explains why I did that, and that explains why that thing happened to me. And so you're not going to understand everything overnight. It's going to take a long time. And to be honest, it's probably going to be a lifelong journey of understanding what autism means to you and how autism affects you. I feel like now I'm at a place in my life where I do understand a lot of these things. However, it took me a long time to get here. And so just be patient with this process, and just be patient with yourself through this journey. And the reality is that you are going to have some questions. There are going to be some things that are really hard to process and that are really challenging to kind of work through and understand and relate back to yourself. And it's going to be like this for a while. And that's just the reality of it. And so I would really recommend to try your best, and I know of course it's easier said than done, but try your best to release the expectations that you have for how you need to get through this process. This is new to you. This is something that affects everything about your life, and it affects how you see reality pretty much. And so take a lot of time with this and be patient with yourself and give yourself as much compassion as you need. I probably had like more meltdowns and shutdowns during this process because of all the new things that were happening. A lot of which were, like I mentioned, new understandings and new realizations. But this is really overwhelming, especially for us autistic people who, like, we thrive when we're in our routines, and we thrive when we have structure, and when there's something new, and when it's something new that we might not fully understand what it means to us, that's going to be overwhelming. And so give yourself grace, give yourself compassion, allow yourself to slow down if you need it. I was kind of on a trajectory in my life before my diagnosis that was just getting more and more and more out of alignment with what I needed and with who I was. And I really needed that time to slow down and realign my trajectory into a path that that felt right for me, that supported me. And this was a really lengthy process that required a lot of rest. It required a lot of crying, confusion, but all those things I realize now, looking back at the bigger picture with a different perspective, I can see why all those things had to happen. So now in my life, I can be the most aligned that I've ever been. So the first tip that I would have is to give yourself time. And with that, during that time, give yourself a lot of compassion, and just mostly give yourself grace. Like, try to release the expectations that you have for yourself right now. You don't have it all figured out right now, and you're not expected to, and you don't need to. And that understanding, it will come with time. So just be patient with yourself and trust this process. The second tip that I have, and it's something that I honestly wish I had more of when I was going through this, is external support. Like, we can do our best to support ourselves and lift ourselves up when we need it. And also when dealing with something as big as receiving an autism diagnosis later in life, we might need external support. This can look like finding a therapist who has a good grasp of autism, especially in adults. And that's something that has been incredibly beneficial for me in my journey, and releasing a lot of the shame that I felt, working through some of those traumas that I previously mentioned. If you have like a family member or a friend who you feel really close to, and I know a lot of us don't, and so this might not be the best piece of advice for you, but if that resonates, then, and if you feel comfortable being vulnerable with them, and if you feel like they'll actually be able to listen, maybe try talking about it with them. Find some sort of community. And for a lot of us neurodivergent people, a lot of that community actually comes from the internet and social media. And if that's the only form of community that you can find, or that is accessible to you right now, that's okay too. I mean, I'm here. That's why I'm making this video, to help you feel less alone in this process, because I definitely know how I felt going through this process. And so finding some sort of community, finding some sort of external support, like, you don't have to do this all alone. And I would highly recommend finding a therapist, even if it means going through 1, 2, 3, or 4 different therapists who you feel like you vibe with, who you feel like can actually listen and understand what you're saying. I feel like that could definitely help, at least to help you process all these things that you're experiencing, because it is a lot to process all on your own. And I tried to do that for a while, and it didn't work. I just kept feeling even more drained and even more confused and burnt out. And only when I did finally start seeing a therapist, I felt like a big sigh of relief. Like, okay, there is actually ways to support me through this, and I'm really grateful for that. Another tip that I have is to start learning more about autism, if you haven't already. I know for me, I started learning about autism before I was diagnosed, because I was really thinking like, okay, this could be me, and then I wanted to read more about it, and I was like, yep, this is definitely me. And then I read more, and I was like, that's me also. And then after I had the official diagnosis of being autistic, I learned even more about it and how it related specifically to me. And that also really helped because it helped me understand what all of these like clinical terms meant. It helped me understand how autism affects me personally, because autism is a spectrum, and while we do have to meet the certain diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, it's going to affect us all a little bit differently, and it's going to show up for us in ways that might be different from another autistic person. And so with learning about autism, I think it also helps us learn about ourselves, especially when we had all these like questions about ourselves. I know for me growing up when I was a child, I always felt different. Like I felt different from the people around me, almost like I was like just observing them through like a window almost. Like I tried my best to mask and to fit in. And one, that felt completely out of alignment with who I was. And two, I don't think I really did that good of a job of it now looking back, considering I never really had many friends and I always had a hard time relating with people. And so when I started to learn more about autism, it helped me have more compassion for my younger self. And it helped me have compassion for myself now, realizing I got through all of that without knowing this really, like, one of the most important things about myself and the way that my brain operates. Like, that's incredible. And so by learning more about autism, I was able to relate it back to my younger self, and I'm able to relate it to my present self, and I'm able to use what I've learned to create a future that really supports me. And when learning about autism, there's so many different resources and it can get really overwhelming. Social media is a great place to learn about it, but it certainly is, I wouldn't say it's the best place, and I wouldn't say it's the only place to learn about it. It's great to hear from other autistic people like myself and other autistic content creators. But I think that it's also important to kind of like read the science of it, maybe read some books about it, and just kind of learn about it at your own pace as well. And with learning about autism, it kind of leads me to my next tip, which is find ways to accommodate yourself. Find ways to support your needs. These needs that, for the most part, have probably been disregarded your whole life by other people and probably also by yourself. You probably, at least I know I did, I sort of gaslit myself when it came to a lot of my my support needs and my like sensory accommodations. I was like, oh, I can push through it, I'll be fine. I wasn't fine. It led me to feeling burnt out for a few years, but now that I have ways to support myself, I feel like I have more capacity for life and the demands of life. A few examples I can think of that are really simple. When I leave the house, I put earplugs in or I put my headphones on. When I'm at the grocery store, when I'm anywhere in public, it really helps to block out any sort of like unexpected loud sounds. And that helps give me just a little bit more capacity because I don't need to rely on so much brain power to try to like filter it out the best I can and to try to push through it the best that I can. Another way is allowing myself to stim and utilizing fidget tools has been really helpful. In most of my YouTube videos, when I'm just sitting here talking, it helps me keep my train of thought. But then when I'm also like at a restaurant or like anywhere where I can easily get overstimulated, it helps me regulate just a little bit. And with stimming and with fidget tools also, it's also kind of important to figure out like what exactly your sensory needs are. Are you a sensory seeker with some areas? Are you are you avoiding certain sensory experiences? For me, for the most part, I do my best to like avoid most of my sensory experiences. Sound is one for me. Smells is probably the biggest one for me that really overstimulates me. So for smells, I always bring some essential oils with me, like lavender, or like patchouli. I find that those are smells that I actually enjoy. And so if I'm somewhere where there's someone wearing like a lot of perfume, or something just smells so bad and it's super distracting and super overwhelming for me, I'll just put like a little bit of essential oils under my nose. And for the most part, it masks out the bad smells. So that's just another example of like sensory accommodations, if smell is a big one for you. And then when learning about my sensory needs, I also have learned, and it's crazy, I didn't realize this before, that I am like a huge proprioceptive sensory seeker. So I love like feeling my muscles. That's why I realize now that I have loved lifting weights for so long. I also love like sitting on a hard surface, like on the floor, or putting a weighted blanket on me. So that's something that really helps me. So just kind of understanding what your sensory needs are, and then how can you support yourself, whether it's allowing yourself to indulge in certain experiences that bring sensory joy for you, or whether it's accommodating yourself on ways to kind of like prevent certain sensory experiences from becoming too overwhelming for you. And that just goes along with learning more about autism and learning more about how autism affects you personally. And then the last thing that I want to say is, and it kind of goes back to what I started the video with, having patience for yourself and patience for this journey. Understand that I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I think that when we receive our autism diagnoses, there's a lot of focus on the challenges, and there's a lot of focus on the negative things. And those things are absolutely real, and they're absolutely valid, and that's probably why we seeked an assessment in the first place, or that's why we were diagnosed with autism, because a lot of these things do cause us many challenges throughout our days. And there are still some strengths that you have. And so through this process, while learning more about your challenges and learning more about the differences that you have compared to neurotypical people, I would encourage you to also find time to focus on some of those things that make you you, that you love about yourself. And they may be autism related, or they might not be, but it's still really important that when we're going through this journey of understanding our place in the world and how to support ourselves and learning about our challenges, that we also spend time looking at the strengths that we have, that we spend time really acknowledging ourselves. That's another thing too, is this is definitely not an easy journey. And if you're anything like how I was, I lived a really, my life was really challenging before I knew that I was autistic because of my autism. And like, just give yourself the acknowledgement, like you got through that, and now you're in a different phase of your life now where you actually can support yourself, or you can at least find ways to have other people help support you. And you made it through that. You made it through a really challenging portion of your life. And so just give yourself the acknowledgement that you deserve, be proud of yourself, and find some things that you do love about yourself. Find some things that you're really good at, and give some attention to those strengths too, as well as acknowledging, and this isn't an either or, this is a and. So acknowledge your strengths and also acknowledge your challenges. And it doesn't have to be either or. We can hold space for those two things. And so I really hope that this video can help just one person. Like I mentioned, I felt so lonely, and I felt so confused and like just lost during the process of thinking I could be on the autism spectrum, and then seeking out a formal assessment, and then eventually receiving my autism diagnosis. And I wish that I had something like this to help me through this process. And so I really hope that one or two of these things really resonate with you, and it's something that you can take to make this difficult and challenging and confusing and lonely process to make it just a little bit more easier, because you deserve that. And I'm also really proud of you for getting through this challenging part of your life. So be proud of yourself too, and thank you for watching.